The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. The kind of ordinary day that gives no warning before it shatters your life. I remember the light was slanting through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air, and I was smiling as I dialed my son's number. I'd just finished hemming the pale pink dress I'd bought for his wedding, imagining how I'd look in the photos, a proud mother beaming beside her only child. I'd even practiced what I'd say in my toast. Max answered on the third ring, his voice flat. "Hey, Mom. I was just calling to finally pin down the date for the wedding, sweetheart," I said, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. "I need to book my hair appointment, and your Aunt Diana wants to buy her plane tickets from Chicago." There was a rustling sound. Then a woman's voice, crisp and cold, came on the line. It was Lena, my daughter-in-law. "Oh, Renata," she said, and I could hear the chilling smile in her tone, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words did not compute. They were like shards of glass, slicing through the cozy fantasy I'd built in my kitchen. Special people. The phone, a harmless piece of plastic, suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. My vision tunneled until all I could see was the worn pattern on my kitchen linoleum. I, who had paid their $500 monthly rent for 3 years, who had bought every stick of furniture in their apartment, who had filled their refrigerator week after week when their own funds ran out, was not a special person. I was a utility, a resource. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching the ghost of my son in the empty air, avoiding my gaze as he always did when Lena delivered a blow. I could picture her perfectly, making herself comfortable on the sofa I'd bought them, a look of serene triumph on her face. The pale pink dress hung in my closet, a monument to my foolishness. The $200 I'd spent on it, the new shoes, the careful planning, all of it was ash. I had saved $1,000 for their gift. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, hoping they might come here afterward, to my home, to celebrate. Every hope, every dream, collapsed into dust with those 4 poisoned words. Only special people. Max's voice, hesitant and rehearsed, eventually cut through the static in my brain. "Mom." It was an intimate thing. Very small. Just the 2 of us and the witnesses. But it was a lie. I knew it was a lie because a week later, the evidence bloomed across social media like a poisonous flower. There were photos of Lena in a white dress I'd helped finance with the $800 I'd given her for personal expenses the month before. There were her parents, beaming, their arms slung around the happy couple. There were her siblings, toasting with champagne, their laughter frozen in digital perpetuity. I saw the whole, happy, complete picture of a family celebration from which I had been deliberately, surgically removed. For 7 days, I moved through my life like a ghost. I didn't cry. I was too numb for tears. I was a balloon whose string had been cut, drifting into a cold, empty sky. And then on the 8th day, the phone rang again. It was Lena, but her voice was unrecognizable. The confidence was gone, replaced by a wheedling, desperate tremor. "Renata? The rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us. He says if we don't pay this week, he'll kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." The audacity of it stole my breath. In the silence that followed, I remembered all the times I had rushed to the bank, canceling my own plans. I remembered the countless meals of beans and rice I'd eaten to ensure they had steak. I remembered the small luxuries I'd denied myself. A new coat, a weekend trip, a dinner with friends, all sacrificed at the altar of their comfort. And now, after this ultimate humiliation, she called me as if I were a forgetful employee, as if the betrayal had never happened. "Lena," I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised even me. It was the calm of the deep ocean, where light does not reach. Didn't I warn you that I only help special people? The silence on the other end of the line was profound, a void into which all her pretended affection evaporated. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "Renata, I don't understand," she stammered, her voice cracking. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." The lie was so blatant it was almost impressive. It was the same honeyed tone she used to ask for money for the wedding dress, for the rings, for the honeymoon. All things I had helped pay for, only to be barred from the event itself. For 3 years I had lived on a tightrope, carefully measuring every word, every gift, every gesture, hoping to earn a crumb of affection from my own son. I had been the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never complained when they treated me as an inconvenience. But that phrase, "only special people," had been a key, turning a lock deep inside me, opening a door I didn't know existed. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. The tears came then, but they were not tears of sadness. They were hot, angry tears of liberation. They were for all the times I had allowed myself to be made small, for all the times I had confused generosity with self-erasure. I cried for the woman who had believed her love was a burden, her presence a nuisance, her money her only value. When the storm passed, I felt hollowed out and scoured clean. The next morning, I looked in the bathroom mirror and saw a stranger. The same tired eyes, the same wrinkles etched by years of giving more than I received. But beneath the familiar surface was a new hardness, a flinty core of resolve. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the very spot where I had so often counted out bills for their emergencies and planned surprises that were met with indifference. This time, I laid out my checkbook and bank statements. I needed to see the arithmetic of my own folly. The numbers were a brutal accounting. $500 a month for rent times 36 months. $18,000. Food and household supplies, roughly $200 a month. Another $7,200. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, anniversaries, at least $3,000. Lena's medical emergencies, $800. The car loan they never repaid, $2,500. The air conditioner for their apartment, $600. The living room furniture, $1,200. The total was $33,400. A fortune. It was money from my late husband's inheritance, from my pension, from the savings I had scraped together through decades of honest work. All of it vanished into the bottomless pit of their entitlement. When my phone rang with Max's name, my hand didn't even twitch. I let it ring. When Lena called 10 minutes later, I did the same. A text from Max appeared. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I deleted it. The world did not end. The sun continued to rise. That afternoon, I went for a walk with no destination. I passed the park where I'd pushed a young Max on the swings, where he'd hugged my legs and told me I was the best mommy in the world. Where had that boy gone? When had I started believing that love was a currency I had to earn with monthly payments? My feet carried me to the bank. Mr. Klein, the branch manager who had processed my dutiful transfers for 3 years, saw me and waved from his office. I walked in, my head high. "Mr. Klein," I said, my voice steady, "I need to cancel all my automatic transfers." He looked startled. "Are you sure, Mrs. Richter? Did something happen?" "What happened," I replied, "is that I finally opened my eyes." As he processed the paperwork, my phone buzzed incessantly in my purse. Max, Lena, Max again. It was as if they had a sixth sense for the moment their financial lifeline was being severed. I took the phone out and powered it off. The silence was beautiful. Mrs. Richter, Mr. Klein said gently as he handed me the confirmation slips. I hope you are not being pressured into this. I've seen you be very generous. His kindness from a near stranger was almost my undoing. I'm not being pressured. I told him, my throat tight. On the contrary, I have finally stopped pressuring myself. The feeling as I left the bank was one of incredible, impossible lightness. I was free. This newfound freedom was immediately tested. When I returned home, I found 3 cars parked outside my house. Max's, Lena's, and one I didn't recognize. Through my own window, I saw movement inside. My blood turned to ice. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I believed in the family I thought we were. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The scene inside was a violation. Max sat on my sofa, his head in his hands. Lena paced like a caged tiger. A man in a gray suit was sifting through my personal papers on the dining table. What is happening here? My voice cut through the room, louder and firmer than I had intended. They all flinched. Lena was the first to recover. Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher. He's a lawyer. My situation? I asked, the calm returning colder now. I'm perfectly well. Max looked up, his face a mask of manufactured concern. Mom, we went to the bank. Mr. Klein said you canceled everything. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been strange. Mr. Fisher approached with a slimy professional smile. Mrs. Richter, your children are concerned about your mental well-being. Erratic financial decisions can be a sign of cognitive decline. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. This wasn't a visit. It was an ambush. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their funding. They were laying the groundwork to have me declared incompetent. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. All of you, get out of my house. What followed was a battle for my very soul. They threatened, they cajoled, they emotionally blackmailed. Lena cried tears of furious frustration. Max tried guilt, invoking a past love that felt like a story about another person. Mr. Fisher mentioned power of attorney and legal options. I stood my ground, a rock against their tidal wave of manipulation. When they finally left, defeated and furious, I closed the door and leaned against it, the silence of the house roaring in my ears. It was the sound of my freedom, hard-won and fragile. The war had only begun. They hired a lawyer and filed a petition for a competency hearing. They recruited a biased neighbor and tricked my own pharmacist into signing a misleading statement. They sent a social worker to my home, claiming I was a vulnerable elder at risk. Each attack was designed to break me, to prove I was the confused, paranoid old woman they needed me to be for their case to succeed. But I was no longer the woman I had been. I fought back. I hired my own lawyer, the formidable Mr. Weber. I got a clean bill of health from a geriatric psychiatrist. I installed security cameras. I changed my locks. And most importantly, I found an army. My neighbor, Eleanor, who had been through a similar ordeal, became my staunch ally. She introduced me to a circle of women: Cynthia, Maria, Carmen, Alfreda. A sisterhood of survivors who understood the unique pain of being monetized by your own family. They became my witnesses, my friends, my refuge. The day of the court hearing was the final crucible. I wore my best suit and looked the judge squarely in the eye. I watched my son and his wife perjure themselves, painting me as a senile fool manipulated by strangers. I saw the cold calculation in Lena's eyes, and the pathetic weakness in Max's. And when it was my turn to speak, I told the truth. I spoke not with hysterics, but with the devastating clarity of a woman who has nothing left to lose. I spoke of the $33,400. I spoke of the wedding I was not special enough to attend. I spoke of the profound loneliness of being loved only for what you can provide. When the judge dismissed their case, the victory was not sweet. It was somber. It was the closing of a door I had once hoped would lead back to my son. I saw them one last time in the hallway, their faces etched with failure and fury. There was no apology, only defeat. In the months that followed, I sold the house that held so many ghosts. I moved to a bright apartment in the city. I donated a significant portion of my money to charities fighting elder abuse. With the rest, I began to live, truly live, for the first time since my husband died. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed of. I took up painting again. I surrounded myself with people who valued my presence, not my pocketbook. I never heard from Max or Lena again. I learned through the grapevine that they struggled, that Lena had to get a job, that they moved to a smaller apartment. I felt a distant pang, not of regret, but of a sorrow that had been cauterized. They had taught me the most painful lesson of my life, that love cannot be bought, and that sometimes, the family you choose is the one that truly matters. Some evenings, I stand on my balcony and watch the city lights twinkle on. The pale pink dress is long gone, donated to a thrift store. The ghost of that hopeful, foolish woman has been laid to rest. My name is Renata. I am 72 years old. I was broken, but I reassembled myself into something stronger, something wiser. My revenge was not vengeance. It was a quiet, steadfast revolution. It was the reclamation of my own soul. And in the serene silence of my own company, I have never been less alone.